So, I've done a guide on every single brand new fully evolved Pokemon available in Regulation D. I also gave them a ranking, and now I'm going to put all those rankings in one place, because who doesn't love a good tier list? So this is going to be my thoughts on why I gave those Pokemon those rankings. If you're interested in seeing the sets that I've given the Pokemon, then go and check out the guides that are available on my channel as well. So, Charizard to start off with. C for Charizard, because the main point of Charizard is that it's supposed to do absolutely massive fire damage in the sun. However, Chi-Yu is just very slightly stronger than Charizard, even with the solar power boost. Because of the Beads of Ruin, Chi-Yu just clips out on doing the damage for Charizard, so you might as well just use Chi-Yu. Charizard is going to be used if you really, really need that ground immunity, because obviously Chi-Yu can't do that, but otherwise, Chi-Yu is just very slightly stronger and also helps out your partners. So the main reason you'd be using Charizard, you might as well just use Chi-Yu. So it's a little bit unfortunate for Charizard, but I guess it's had its spotlight for the last however many years in VGC because of all the Mega Evolutions and the Gigantamax and all that. So it's actually quite nice that it's not that viable anymore. Raichu Alolan is going in the D ranking. So Fake Out is always a nice thing to have, but the main reason to have used Raichu, the Alolan Raichu in the past, was the Stoked Spark Surfer, and that's not available. So that was the main reason to use it. Now that's not available, and we don't, I was going to say we don't have Tapu Koko. We have Pink Urchin. That doesn't really count, because that's going to be super slow and not that great. So you'd have to manually set Electric Terrain, which is one of the moves I recommended on Raichu. But otherwise, being super fast, you might as well just use Regieleki. Because Regieleki can do, apart from Fake Out, pretty much everything that Raichu would want to do, just better. Because it's already faster than everything without the need for its ability, and it can also do way more damage. So, Alolan Dugtrio, F. There is literally no reason to be running this Pokemon. There is no niche. Use Iron Treads. That's literally it. Alolan Persian. Alolan Persian is going into the B ranking. It's still going to be very viable because of the Fur Coat ability. You've got very fast Fake Out, faster to Fake Out than Raichu, so it's definitely going to be pretty good there. It's got a fantastic supportive move pool. You've got to spam Icy Winds pretty fast. You get Parting Shot. Fake Out and Parting Shot has been a very strong combination in the past, so there's no reason why it couldn't be on Persian. And lots of other supportive moves that it can do as well. It's just not going to be able to do too much damage outside of Foul Play, which is still perfectly fine, because when you're using Foul Play as your damage output, you get to fully invest in bulk and speed. So then you'll be able to survive a lot more things and outspeed a lot more things. But Persian is still going to be pretty decent, but it's not going to be game breaker or anything. It's just going to be an overall good pick whenever you have it. So B is perfect for it. So then we got Hisuian Arcanine. That is going to be, I think, slightly higher ranked than other people would have initially gone for it. But the way I see it is it's kind of like Dragonite. So Dragonite ended up being way better than everyone expected, because Terra Normal Extreme Speed was actually incredibly strong. Arcanine, well, it's Hisuian Arcanine. Obviously, Cantonian can do it as well. But Hisuian Arcanine can do the Banded Extreme Speed with Terra Normal as well. But then its actual stab attacks are way more reliable than Dragonite. So Dragonite needs to go for Outrage if it wants to go for the most amount of damage it can do. And that is unreliable in two ways, in the fact that you are locked into Outrage for 2 or 3 turns, which obviously isn't great, and you don't get to pick your target. So it's obviously very strong, and it sees a lot of success. Arcanine can do the same base power damage output with Flare Blitz, but you get to choose your target and you get to switch up your moves if you want to as well. So Arcanine is still going to be just slightly weaker than Dragonite, but also does the same thing. But when it's not doing the extreme speed, it can do it stronger. And also, Head Smash is way stronger than the Outrage as well, because 150 base power is absolutely massive. Being able to have access to either Rock Head or Intimidate, that's two very, very strong abilities for it. Intimidate's obviously great, don't need to mention that, but Rock Head paired with Flare Blitz and Head Smash, that's a very good combination. So the fact that it's quad weak to water and ground, that's usually quite killer for the combination of typing being bad. You just change out of your typing. That's Terra is allowing much more things to be viable in this format. I think that really helps Hisuian Arcanine as well. So Slowbro, I gave it a C ranking. Quick Draw, Quick Claw is quite cool, and it's a pretty reasonable chance to always move first, so you don't care about your slow speed, but then it's not actually that strong, so you don't get to make use of it the most. So not really ranking Slowbro too high. Quick Claw, Quick Draw is something you can go for, and it is unique to Slowbro, but probably not that great. Alolan Muck I put in the C ranking as well. It used to be very strong, but losing the 50% recovery from the super berries kind of crippled Muck. Because then if you're using Gluttony with the 33% recovery, you really should just be using Citrus Berry and have one of its other better abilities. Like, I'm sure there's some very cool things you can do with Power of Alchemy. I just haven't found them yet. But there's definitely going to be some cool things you can do. So, Electrode, that's going into the D tier as well. The only reason you'd be using Electrode is you are bullet seeding with a loaded dice into your Choice Scarf Annihilate. And that's literally the only reason you should be using Electrode. Because that is its niche. Like, only Electrode can do that, so that is going to give it a slight niche. Otherwise, it would have gone in F. Because it's super fast, and that's really cool. But Regieleki's faster and stronger and everything like that. Basically the same thing as Raichu. Might as well just use Regieleki outside of that one little thing that Electro can do. So Taurus is going in the C ranking. I would have given it D for the gimmick of Anger Point, but the fact that it can go for special Sheer Force with Life Orb and just go for like Thunderbolt and Ice Beam and tear it into Electric so it can actually Oko Urshifu's, that is actually a viable moveset. It's probably not that great, and it's probably going to be a sixth mon on your team that solves some matchups, but otherwise it's actually not terrible. So it's going in C rather than D. Otherwise the Anger Point would have just been the gimmick that goes into the D ranking. Articuno, it's got the buff to, no, I was going to say Hail. It's not Hail anymore, that's the point. It's Snow now. So Snow gives it a defense boost, which makes it a bit more viable. But then you have to be using a Bomber Snow to start off with, unless you're using manual Snowscape, but then you've got 2 ice types anyway, and at that point, why aren't you just going with something like Iron Bundle to spam Blizzard rather than Articuno? So it's still fine, and it can go for something like Bright Powder and Snow Cloak, and then it's quite tricky to be able to hit it, but otherwise, Iron Bundle's going to be way more offensive. It's just if you're wanting the bulk from the Articuno, and the fact that you can dodge things as well. Galarian Articuno, that is significantly better in my opinion. So, Articuno, the Galarian Articuno, I'm just going to say Articuno, referring to Galarian now, is going to be very flexible. You can go for Tailwinds and go fast. You can go for Trick Room, you can go slow. You can go for Calm Mind, bulky setup, and then you're sorted in that as well. And it's got a fantastic ability. Competitive is very, very strong, given how strong Intimidate is. So, got all the Intimidators still in the format. You're going to get a free +2 whenever you're intimidated. It's also going to dissuade the opponent from going things like Snarl and Icy Wind, because then you'll still be getting a boost with that as well. I also think that Galarian Articuno is the perfect partner to Ursaluna. Like, typing-wise, they synergize very well. You can Earthquake next to Articuno completely freely. You're going to be able to quad resist the fighting attacks that would want to go for Ursaluna as well. There's some really nice synergy as well. Especially on the fact that Ursaluna really wants to be intimidated, so Facade is not just a no-co on everything, and if you do intimidate it while it's next to Articuno, that's going to get the competitive boost, and then suddenly that's the massive threat as well. So I think there's some really good hidden synergy between Articuno and Ursaluna that does need to be tapped into. Zapdos going into A tier as well. It's a very, very good counter to Rapid Strike Urshifu. Obviously, if you're a good counter to that, then you're going to be much more viable in the format, given that that's going to be one of the most used Pokemon. So it's got access to Static, which activates, or can activate on each hit of the Surging Strikes, so you've got a very good chance to paralyze them. Give it a Rocky Helmet as well, then they do not want to Surging Strikes you. Then they'll take loads of recoil from the Rocky Helmet, and they'll also have a very good chance to be paralyzed, and on top of that, you just OHKO them back with a Thunderbolt. So it's Zapdos going to be very, very strong. It's got Tailwind back now. It didn't have it in the last generation. It's got Tailwind back, so it's going to be able to do a nice speed control that it did in the previous generation. Back before Sword and Shield, it was just going for bulky and bulking yourself up completely and just going for Tailwind Roost, and then you'll be able to get some speed control and make yourself unkillable as well. I see no reason why it can't do that in this format as well. Galarian Zapdos is also going into the A tier. Just like with Competitive being a very strong ability on Articuno, Defiant is also very good. It's not quite as good into Intimidate, because you only get a +1 as like a net positive of +1. Because you've got a -1 attack, but it's still a significant boost that's going to allow you to do a lot of damage. Also gets Tailwind now, so it's going to be able to set that very nicely, pretty fast, dissuade, intimidates, do loads of damage. So it's also going to be a pretty good counter to Urshifu, because it just OHKOs it with Brave Bird while outspeeding it, which is quite nice for it. Moltres, that's going into the C ranking, so it is an entirely reasonable Choice Scarfer on a Rain team, in my opinion, because it's quite tricky to fit a Fire type that's reasonable onto Rain teams. Because obviously you're reducing the damage output from your fire attacks, so you want to be able to do some other kind of damage if you are a fire type, and it gets to go for Hurricane. So it's one of the stronger Hurricane Pokemon in the format, like it's tying with the genies and all that, but it's also a fire type that if you are not in the rain and you need to deal with things with a fire type attack, you absolutely can. But outside of that, it's not that viable. It's just like Charizard. Charizard wants to be in the sun, Moltres wants to be in the rain. A little bit counterintuitive, but that's really what Moltres wants to be doing. Be the fire type on a rain team that is still perfectly fine not going for its fire type attacks. Galarian Moltres, that's going in the A tier. It doesn't have Dynamax, and that was what made it very, very strong back in the previous generation. Nasty Plot is still going to be fine, because it's still bulky enough to make use of the Nasty Plot, but then you're not going to be that strong. Like, you're going to be able to do some significant damage if you've got a Nasty Plot up, and you'll be able to start to shift into Oko territory if you get your Berserk activated, so then you'd be +3 instead. That will be able to pick up quite a few KOs, but the fact you're limited to Air Slash as your flying type coverage, it's going to be a little bit weak. If you go for Hurricane, then it's shaky accuracy, unless you're paired in the rain, but not being able to access max airstream as a massive hit, that's going to cripple Moltres just a little bit. So I think the Assault Vest version is going to be a little bit more viable on the Moltres. Can also go for Tailwinds and support and be like a pseudo Mandibuzz as well, because Mandibuzz was able to be super bulky and support in the previous generation. Moltres can definitely do that as well. If you are using Typhlosion, it should definitely be the Hisuian version. So going to put the Typhlosion, the regular one, the Jotonian? That's the first time I've ever said Jotonian. Into the C ranking, because it literally just should be Typhlosion Hisuian. Because then you get the immunity to Fake Out, so that you can just go for Choice Scarf Eruption uninterrupted by Fake Outs, so you can just spam that very nicely. You get extra coverage with just Shadow Ball to be able to pick off things like Flutter Manes very nicely as well. It should just be the Hisuian version, because it's also stronger than the Jotonian version. And that little bit boost in power is going to be significant. If you really want to be immune to Fire-type attacks, then go with Typhlosion, but just resisting is surely good enough for the increase in damage output and extra stab that Typhlosion Hisuian version does give you. So Quagsire, it literally just should be a Gastrodon. Unaware's cool, but it literally just should be a Gastrodon every single time, so it's going in the F tier. So I gave Galarian Slowking an A ranking, and that's, again, a Pokemon that was probably higher than people expected. I reckon that as the meta starts to develop, Galarian Slowking will be a very good anti-meta pick, because it seems pretty good into like certain Pokemon that are already popping up, like Rapid Strike Urshifu. You just OHKO it with your Psychic type attacks. You can go for Trick Room really nice and slow, so that you can counter all of those Tornadus teams that are going for the Tailwinds and want to be going super fast. I reckon that Galarian Slowking is a sleeper pick. It might not be that great initially, but I think as the format progresses, I reckon Slowking's going to find a place, because it should be a pretty reasonable anti-meta pick. Quillfish technically didn't do it, but I did mention that it was the fully evolved Pokemon, so literally should just be an Overquill. Eviolite helps on your defensive side, cool, but just be an Assault Vest Overquill instead. So I'm going to put the Quillfish into F, so I'm not going to even bother doing a guide with that one, because I did say it was just fully evolved Pokemon. Literally just use Overquill instead. So then, Uxie is kind of like Cresselia, but not quite. There's most of the time it should just be Cresselia. There's a couple of things that Uxie can do as well. It can spam Yawns, which Cresselia can't do, but otherwise just use Cresselia. Mesprit, kind of the similar thing, but it's a bit stronger than Cresselia is. So if you want to be going for a calm mindset, you absolutely can, because it will be able to do some significantly more damage. Like Cresselia probably needs to be a +2 before it starts to reasonably OHKO things. Mesprit can get away with +1. And it gets pretty similar coverage, but is also like the 20 base power increase in special attack. That's pretty significant. The bulk is noticeably weaker, but otherwise it can be a pseudo Cresselia, and if you need to be able to pick up some KOs that Cresselia wouldn't otherwise, then Mesprit is perfectly reasonable. Azelf, that's also a very, very strong Pokemon to be going for attacks with, because it's the strongest strongest Pokemon with access to Explosion. So 125 base attack. The main reason to be using Azelf is explode next to your Ghost or Telepathy Pokemon in order to enable some sort of strategy. Because the Terra Normal Explosion from Azelf OHKOs a lot of Pokemon in the format. And it's also pretty fast, so it'll be able to get off pretty reasonably as well. While also being very good on the special side, so you could easily go for a special attacking Azelf as well. It's also a very good speed tier, outspeeding a lot of the Pokemon in the format. Obviously not the super fast ones like Fluttermane and all that, but fast enough that it is entirely viable. Heatran is the first S tier Pokemon. I don't think that's really debatable. The typing is absolutely fantastic. It's going to synergize very well with multiple Pokemon in the format. You can now go for Terra Grass, so that you can be resisting the 4x weakness that you would have had in the ground, while also benefiting from your Flash Fire by losing a weakness as a ground type. So the fact that you can Terra now with Heatran, it's going to be incredibly strong. Cresselia, having access to Lunar Blessing, don't know why they needed to give it that move, but it's still going to be as strong as ever, even though it got technically nerfed by losing 10 of its defenses. Which is quite funny that it got nerfed in this generation, while also getting a massive buff in Lunar Blessing. Like, that's a fantastic move. I've always been a fan of Life Dew, and the fact that you get the status removing as well, that's very, very strong, Cazellia. It can still do all the things it's done in the previous generation. It can be the bulky Trick Room setter it needs to be. It can go for the Calm Mind sets. We've already seen it win a tournament with the Stored Power Calm Mind set. So, yeah, Cresselia is still going to be as strong as ever. If you're using Samurott, it should definitely be the Hisuian version. So that's going to be a theme here. So with the Samurott, it's going in the D ranking. Not really any reason to use it. You might as well use the Hisuian one, and that's going in the A ranking. So, being able to set up free spikes is very nice. I'm a little bit annoyed that it's shaky accuracy for Ceaseless Edge at 90 accuracy, but otherwise it's a very strong attack. Sharpness is a brilliant ability for Samurott to be able to do some massive damage. Free choice band effectively on most of the attacks it would have wanted to go for anyway. So it's actually going to be pretty strong. It's definitely got competition in Rapid Strike Urshifu and the other water types that you want to go for. But Samurott is definitely a very reasonable Pokemon. Give it an Assault Vest, it's going to bulk itself out. You're going to get free spikes a lot of the time, and you're also going to do massive damage while you're getting those spikes. It's because of the sharpness. So Samurott is going to be a very reasonable Pokemon. It's just the fact that it has to contend with Urshifu that's going to keep it less used than it would have done otherwise. So Hisuian Lilligant, I hate Lilligant. It's entirely reasonable, but I hate it. Because I hate the strategy of just spam Sleep Powder and pray. But that is very reasonable to go for, because Sleep Powder is objectively in your favour to click. So, Hisuian Lilligant's better than the regular Lilligant in my opinion, because it gets the extra stab of the close combat, and it's faster, so you can use it outside of Sun a lot more than you can with the Unovan version. But yeah, I don't like Lilligant. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Zoroark. So Zoroark is going to be catching opponents off guard, like a lot of the time, but that's kind of the gimmick of it. You're trying to catch the opponents off guard and just get some free momentum, but otherwise it's not going to be that strong, because even though it has a fantastic typing, it's kind of wasted on a Pokemon that is literally so frail. Like its bulk is just not there. Like the word bulk does not associate with Zoroark. So if it was bulkier, that would be much more reasonable for it. It's pretty strong and it'll catch opponents off guard, but otherwise it's just really relying on that surprise factor, and if you don't use that properly, then it's not going to be able to win too many games. So, Braviary. Do you use Braviary or Articuno? So, that's a question that I'm going to be asking myself. I'm not sure other people will, because I think I have a lot more faith in Braviary and Articuno than other people do, but Braviary can definitely do some things that Articuno can't. The main thing is the Tinted Lens that is able to just ignore the resistances that you would hit otherwise that would wall Articuno. Like if you face a steel type, Articuno's walled, but Braviary isn't. You can also boost your speed with Esper Wing. So, and that's something that Articuno can't do outside of going for Tailwind. But Braviary being able to just boost its speed while doing massive damage is a very nice niche for it. Otherwise, Articuno is stronger, it's faster, and it's bulkier. So most of the time you'd probably want Articuno. Braviary definitely does have its place though. Prankster Tailwind's pretty good. Do I need to say any more about that? Like we've seen Murkrow and Talonflame be used in previous formats, or previous regulations, I should say. So yeah, Prankster Tailwinds, that's the best Prankster Tailwind Pokemon. I don't think I need to say anymore. Tornadus Therian, that's not so great. Doesn't have Prankster Tailwinds. It's got very fast Tailwinds, like probably the fastest Tailwind, I think. But otherwise, Incarnate Tornadus is stronger, and Prankster is so busted that there's not really any reason to be using the regular Tornadus. In my opinion, that is. So Thunderous, that's also going to be a fantastic support Pokemon. You're going to be able to spam Prankster Thunder Waves. That's nearly as good as Tailwind, and in some cases it will be better because you get that full paralysis as well. So Thunderous can definitely do all the supportive stuff it wants to do, while also being able to be offensive if it does want to. Like you'll definitely be able to just OHKO Urshifus with a Thunderbolt, and you'll be sorted with that. Thunderous Therian is still also very strong, but not quite as strong as Thunderous in terms of the fact that Prankster is busted. It's going to be way better as an offensive Pokemon. If you're running Thunderous offensive, it probably should be the Thunderous Therian form, because you're going to be significantly stronger with 20 base special attack more, and also Volt Absorb while turning into a flying type to get access to Terra Blast Flying is much more beneficial on the Therian version, because if you do it on the Thunderous, the Incarnate version, then you will be weak to electric, whereas Thunderous is immune. So it's got the kind of synergy that Heatran has with its Terra Grass, in the fact that you turn it into something that now has a weakness, but actually doesn't because of your ability. So Thunderous is still going to be able to do some massive damage. Both Landorus, I'm going to put straight into the S tier. So both do very different things, but both do them incredibly well. Life Orb Sheer Force from the Incarnate version does so much damage. And the fact that you can go for Terra Blast Flying as well as extra coverage, that's really nice for it. You can still just bin that off and not bother because it's not Sheer Force boosted. You can go for all of the other attacks it wants to go for. It's a very good speed tier in 101, so it's going to outspeed things like Chi Yu and the Urshifus and all that as well. So it's going to be very, very strong. Landorus hits on the physical side, but now it gets access to Taunting Tantrum. It's been waiting for a reliable single-target ground-type attack for ages. It's also got access to Terra Blast, so it's got a reliable flying attack. Doesn't have to rely on fly anymore, so that is just very good. I don't think I need to say too much more about Landorus. Everyone knows that it's one of the best Pokemon that's ever existed. So Delphox might as well just be Armarouge. Armarouge is better in almost every way. Delphox is faster, to be fair, and Magician, again, can do some cool things, but might as well just be an Armarouge. Chestnut I put into the A tier, probably another surprising one. I think that the fact that it is a very strong body press Iron Defense Pokemon while getting stab on the body press is what puts it up into A. I think the stab on the body press is the main thing, because you're going to be able to do some good damage after some Iron Defenses, but Chestnut will be able to just Oko things after like even one Iron Defense. And because you can tear it out of the Grass Fighting into an actually good typing, that's really, really nice for it. While also, as its regular typing, can resist Rapid Strike Urshifu. So that is quite a nice thing for Chestnut, and I have a lot of faith in it, even if other people don't particularly. So Greninja, it's got access to Water Pledge, which is a reliable water-type attack on the special side. We don't have to go for Hydro Pump, but it's not going to be that great because Protean's been nerfed. So if Protean was still the regular Protean, I'll probably put it in B. But otherwise now you have to stick with Battle Bond, and that's fine, but it's probably not that great. Might as well you just use the Hisuian Samurott instead if you're looking for that Water and Dark type. So Hisuian Avalugg I would have put in A if Galastria wasn't in the format, because I have a lot of faith in this Avalugg because of Terra. Ice and Rock is a terrible defensive typing, like truly terrible. But you just get rid of it. You just Terra out of it. And then you get to make use of your massive defense stat while being a good typing. While also having, like, Rock and Ice is fantastic offensively, but terrible defensively. You get to keep that offensiveness while turning into a good type. So I would have had a lot of faith in Avalugg. However, Galastria exists. And Galastria, for the most part, does what Avalugg wants to be doing, but better. So at least Avalugg has a slightly more accurate Ice move in Strong Draw Ice Fang compared to Icicle Crash, but and better defenses, and resists extreme speed from Dragonite. Like, that is a big thing for Avalugg. It just completely shrugs off extreme speed from Dragonites, which is another thing it has over Galastria, but really should be Galastria. And it is a bit of a shame, because this could have been the format if it just didn't have its enemy in Galastria. Hisuian Goodra, that's also going in A. Body Press Iron Defense, well, it's not Iron Defense, is it? It's Shelter or Acid Armor, doesn't really matter. It's basically the same thing as Chestnut. It's got a fantastic typing compared to Chestnut. Like, Steel and Dragon is brilliant as a typing. It's got way more bulk than Chestnut does, but it doesn't have access to the Stab Body Press. So that is a big thing against Goodra compared to Chestnut. I see it as comparing the two, like, which one do you want to be going for in terms of Iron Defense Body, or I should say Defense Boost and Body Press. Goodra has Life Dew, Chestnut has Leech Seed, so they still both have recovery, but Goodra can still go the alternative route with the Assault Vest. Chestnut really should just be Iron Defense and Body Press. Goodra can be the Assault Vest version that, compared to its previous Goodra, it's used Assault Vest in the past, it can absolutely use it as well, while being absolutely unkillable on the special side. So really do compare Chestnut and Goodra. They both are very, very strong Pokemon in my opinion. So Carbink, that's actually also quite a good counter to Chiempao Dragonite, right? I mean, theoretically it is, but just don't. It's not worth it. So Decidueye, Ghost and Grass, or Grass and Ghost I should say, really should be left to Brambleghast at this point, because there's lots of wind-based moves in the format at the moment. If you're going for Grass and Ghost, it really should just be Brambleghast, so ignore Decidueye. However, the Hisuian Decidueye, that's a little bit more reasonable, because that's going to be able to go for some bulk up stuff while doing massive damage and all the really cool effects with triple arrows. However, if I was going for a grass and fighting type, I would definitely lean more towards Chestnut than I would Decidueye. However, triple arrows is a very, very strong attack. So if you're going for bulk up and being able to do some very good damage, go with Decidueye, but Chestnut is right there and probably does what Decidueye kind of wants to be doing, but a little bit better. And then Berserker. So Berserker is going into the B tier because it gets to boost itself while also boosting its partners. The main one would be Golden Go. Like, Golden Go just OHKOs everything. If you've got Choice Specs, Terra Steel, and Steely Spirit on top of that, it OHKOs a lot of things. Like, go and do some counts with Golden Go with Steely Spirit. It's really funny, because it does way more damage than you would expect. So that pushes Berserker into the B tier, because it can do some good supportive stuff with Fake Out and all that as well, while doing good damage itself. Rillaboom, that's always going into the S tier. Losing Grassy Glide is a very, very good thing. It would be still super busted if it had Grassy Glide. Now it's just regular busted, and that's fine. Because Wood Hammer is now the grass move that you go for. That's still incredibly strong, but at least it doesn't go for priority. Because then, that was the main thing that Rillaboom had going for it. The priority Grassy Glide was just truly busted. Now it just is very strong, but slower. So you can outspeed it and stop it before it wants to be going for its attacks. Inteleon, I have some faith in Inteleon. Because of the fact that we had, like I mentioned with Greninja and had to be Water Pledge instead of Hydro Pump, Snipe Shot is the best special water move that we have available in the format. Like, Hydro Pump is shaky accuracy, it's not reliable. Snipe Shot is 100% accurate, high crit rate, pair it with a Scope Lens or a Razor Claw, on top of the Sniper from Inteleon, and you'll be able to OHKO a lot of things. Inteleon's incredibly frail, but it can be very strong and very fast. So, because of the Snipe Shot, it's going into the B tier. Cinderace, not so great anymore. Like mentioned with the Greninja, and Protean was nerfed, so is Libero. So, not going to be as viable as it was in the previous generation. And I think Gigantamax was a massive thing for Cinderace as well, being able to go for like max Airstream and just be able to turn into the stab of whatever you wanted. Now it can only do that once, and that is a little bit crippling for Cinderace in my opinion. Glastria, I did mention. Avalugg would have been the one, but it's Glastria instead. Glastria, the biggest weakness that it had in the previous generation was Ice is a terrible typing defensively. Now you just get rid of it. It's a brilliant one offensively, and just turn into something else defensively, and you basically just got rid of the one bad thing that Glastria had going for it. Everything else is brilliant about it. Its stats are fantastic. Amazing bulk, amazing offense, super slow, which is a good thing. Like, you either want super fast or super slow if you can, because then you just get to go into Trick Room and you're basically sorted. And then you get a fantastic ability to snowball even further with your Chilling Naze. So Glastria, I think it's going to be a little bit slept on, because Ursaluna's initially going to be the Trick Room sweeper, but Glastria is going to be fantastic because of Terra. Spectria, that's going to be one of the better support Pokemon in the format, in my opinion. Because it's going to be very strong, like with 145 base special attack, and most of the time previously it was just run offensively, but that was usually with Dynamax as well. Like, you could go for max strikes with Hyper Beam so that you can get speed control, you can go for max quakes as coverage, whereas you are stuck with Mud Shot at this point, and that's not very strong. Should just be supported in my opinion, because it gets Snarl and Will-O-Wisp. That's brilliant control, while also being super fast, so it can get off that control before most things would attack, and also having a fantastic ability that can actually still do some damage if you just get one KO with Spectria, while still doing respectable damage to start off with because of its massive special attack stats. So in my opinion, Spectria should be a support Pokemon, but it's actually a very, very strong support Pokemon. Speaking of should be support Pokemon now, Regieleki. So again, in the previous generation, it had a 1.5 times boost with Transistor, and with Dynamax that OHKO'd so many things, and then as soon as you did one, you've got your electric terrain set up, now everything is OHKO'd. So now that's no longer the case. You can't go for Dynamax anymore with Regieleki, that's already a big nerf to it. Transistor being 1.3 instead of 1.5 now, that's a very, very good nerf, because 1.5 was too strong. If it was 1.3 last generation, that would have been so much better. But we've got it now, so that's fine. It's still going to be able to do good damage. It's not busted damage anymore, it's just great damage. And pair it with the Chi-Yu and you'll be able to pick up loads of KOs. But with the 1.3, it's not going to be as strong. So running it supportive is probably the way to go. You can still just spam super fast Electro Webs. That's exactly the main thing that Regieleki would want to be going for. You can run it supportive with screens. You can still run it offensively. You can run it with Choice Scarf to really get those Electro Webs going, even if your opponent Tailwinds. So Regieleki is still going to be a very good support Pokemon. Tapu Fini is no longer a Pokemon. Hooray. I am very thankful of that. That's really good for Regidrago. So obviously there's still fairies in the format, and Fluttermane is the biggest, the most used Pokemon in the format. I am expecting Rapid Strike Urshifu to take over it, but at the moment it's still Fluttermane. Now that's still going to be able to resist it, but some nice things for Regidrago. Like I mentioned, no Misty Terrain setting up by Tapu Fini anymore, when Weezing's not in the format. So Regidrago already has a nice time that it doesn't get its Dragon Energy weakened, and also it can Terra into a resistance to Fairy, most notably Steel, so that you don't just get OHKO by all the Fairies as well, and you get extra coverage in Terra Blast Steel to be able to KO the Fairies, and also it's got Earth Power now. So that's also a nice buff to it, because then that's going to be able to hit Heat Trans Whereas otherwise you would have had literally nothing to hit them. And that would have been a resist to your dragon type attack. So all the steals you can hit now with Earth Power. So Regidrago still going to be very strong. You have to be mindful of this. This can just sweep your team if you're not ready for it. So I would argue that most teams should have at least a fairy / a Terra Fairy somewhere so that you're not just immediately swept by Regidrago. So I think that's going to be a very, very good sweeper in this format. Weird here, you might as well just use Farigiraf or Oranguru. Intimidate on your Trick Room setter is cool, but Armor Tail's way better. Instruct is way better. And the bulk on both of them is also way better. You do way more damage with Farigiraf, and technically Oranguru because you're instructing something that is stronger than you. So yeah, you might as well just use those two if you're using the normal Psychic type. And Indeedee as well. Like, Indeedee would be a better Trick Room setter than Weirded too. Cleaver, free Stealth Rocks, just like the free Spikes. Very, very good. While also coming from a very high attack stat. And Bug and Rock is actually not as bad a typing as I initially thought when I looked at the resistances and the weaknesses. And again, if you are weak to something, just tear it out of it, and then you're basically sorted. You get pretty good coverage with your attacks. Rock is very good coverage, like offensively. You like Rock a lot, and Stone Axe is a good strong attack. That if you just click it once, you've got your Stealth Rocks, you are sorted, because like you don't really have hazard removal in VGC. You don't see Defog, you don't see Rapid Spin really at all. So just being able to set the free Stealth Rocks, really nice for Cleaver. If it didn't have free Stealth Rocks, I'd probably put it in B, but there's a few ways you can run Cleaver, and it's fast enough to be able to make use of it as well. It's not that bulky, but that can be patched with Assault Vest and Focus Sash and all that. Free Stealth Rocks, very, very good. Sneasler, that is a very strong Pokemon in my opinion. I think that Unburden is already very good on it, because there's a few ways you can get that Unburden, and then you can Terra Acrobatics with Terra Flying to be able to make use of that Unburden. Also, Diaclaw is a pretty stupid attack. 50% for a status that could be Sleep is pretty strong. Like, Diaclaw, very, very good attack. If it didn't have Diaclaw, I'd have put it into B. But Diaclaw is a very good attack. Like one of the strongest attacks we have in the game, in my opinion, because 50% for a status, that's massive, while also doing very significant damage because your attack stat is so high. HP base power is pretty reasonable. Like things like Barb Barrage from Overquill, that's not worth it because it's 60 base power. HP base power is absolutely worth it. And then it's still got some very good other abilities, like Poison Touch, to get an even bigger chance of getting a status with the Diaclaw is quite funny. But yeah, Unburden with a Focus Sash, that's really good. Unburden with Fling, that's really good as well. So you can go for Flings Rock. That's one of my main sets that I think is going to be pretty reasonable in Sneasler. You can go for Grassy or Psychic Seed, and then go for Terra Acrobatics. Lots of good things that Sneasler can do. Enamorus, I don't really have too much faith in it. So if it had something like a Leaf Storm on the special side, then I would definitely put it higher. But the fact that your only real self-contrary is Superpower, when you really want to be a special attacker, given your special attack stat is 20 base higher than your attack stat, and the fact that when you're going for a fairy move on the physical side, it's play rough and it can miss, whereas the Moonblast and Dazzling Gleam can't, then I don't really think that Enamorus is as strong as it initially seemed to be. However, the Therian version, I think, is quite strong indeed, because I see it as like a Cresselia that can just go for Calm Minds. I guess it's kind of like a Tapu Fini as well. I prefer to relate it to Cresselia, but yeah, like a Cresselia, you can go for Calm Minds, but 135 special attack is way better than 75 on Cresselia. It's almost double, so you're able to do way more damage than Cresselia. You're kind of closing in on its bulk, which is quite nice. Like, Cresselia is still bulkier, but Enamorus is going to be close enough in its bulk, and after Calm Minds you don't really care, while also being way more offensive. And also, Overcoat is a fantastic ability, so that you are just completely ignoring Amoonguss. So that is a really, really big plus for Enamorus in terms of being just a Calm Minder, because you can also just turn into a Steel type, be immune to Clear Smog. You're also already immune to Rage Powder and Spore, so it's really good against Amoonguss that is going to be still very good in the format. So I have a lot of faith in Enamorus Therian, mainly as the Calm Mind set up Pokemon is what I was going for. Overquill, it's got a cool typing, Dark and Poison, it's pretty good. Intimidate's always a good ability. And if you aren't going for the Intimidate, you can go for Swift Swim, and you can go for Choice Banded Self-Destruct. Not as strong as a Zelf, because it's Self-Destruct instead of Explosion, and it's slightly weaker anyway, but normal Self-Destruct with a Choice Band is still going to KO a lot of Pokemon. So Overquill definitely has its niche. In the fact that it's a Swift Swimmer and an Intimidator, and can be a little bit flexible in that, it's going into the B ranking. So Basculegion is a Pokemon that I have huge faith in after seeing the damage calcs. The fact that it also is resisting Rapid Strike Urshifu, like you're immune to close combat, and you resist the Surging Strikes, that's a big plus for it. think that was the main deciding factor of do I go like A plus or into the S ranking, and the fact that you beat one of the most common Pokemon in the format one-on-one, it goes into the S ranking. Like, have a look at the adaptability calcs. Like, ignore Swift Swim. Swift Swim is great. Like, Swift Swim with just the Life Orb, Wave Crush, Last Respect, Aqua Jet, that's fine. But adaptability is where it's at. Like, seriously, adaptability Vascular Legion does so much damage. If you are the last man standing and you've got 200 base power on your Last Respects, if you've got a choice band, 200 base power, Last Respect, with adaptability, literally nothing is surviving apart from, well, normal types, but not non-normal types. Nothing is surviving. It's incredibly strong. Like, look at the calcs. You will believe. Female, like, that's the male Vascular Legion. It's got more attack than the female one does. And Last Respects is the main thing you want to go for. So there's not really any reason to be using the female version. It's got more special attack, sure. That's probably a better Rain Sweeper, but you kind of had to go for Hydro Pump. And that's not very reliable. And then you go for Shadow Ball instead of Last Respects. Like, you still can Last Respects, but why would you just not be the physical one? So yeah, not really any reason to use the female one. Just use the male one. It's significantly better. Ursaluna, it's pretty busted, isn't it? The Guts boosted Facade is incredibly strong. It OHKOs a lot of the format. So all you need to do is just get your Flame Orb activated and you OHKO most things in the format. It's pretty strong. While also having absolutely busted bulk. Like, it's incredibly bulky. Normal Ground is a fantastic type, both offensively and defensively. You can just tear it out of the weakness, like into a Ghost if you want to be immune to fighting and all that. If you Terra with ground or normal, you're just OHKOing pretty much everything in the format. It's going to be a very strong Pokemon because it's also slow enough to make use of Trick Room, while technically being fast enough, if you do actually want it to be, to make use of Tailwind. So, yeah, Ursaluna's obviously going to be super busted. Don't really think I need to say too much more about it. Rapid Strike Urshifu and the Surging Strike Urshifu, that's the same thing. The Single Strike Urshifu and the Rapid Strike Urshifu are both going into S. So I put the Rapid Strike Urshifu just at the top here. I've just been going in order otherwise, but I put Rapid Strike Urshifu as S+, because I do think it's going to be the best Pokemon in the format. I think it's quite obvious why. It's bypassing Protect is incredibly strong. Like, Protect is a huge part of VGC. Just ignoring that and completely pinning your opponent without the ability to protect from attack, that's just very strong. Critting through things as well, like Surging Strikes and Wicked Blow, being able to crit through things. You ignore screens, you ignore the body press iron defense stuff, you just ignore those defense boosts. And you ignore Intimidates as well. They're just incredibly strong. I think most people at this point know why the Urshifus are very strong. Water Dust tends to be a little bit better because you can OHKO things through Focus Sash, which is quite nice. With Terra Boost, like, you can go Terra Water. That tends to push you over the edge to KO Pokemon that would like to have the Focus Sash, because most Pokemon that have Focus Sash are pretty frail. And that Terra Water does tend to push the Surging Strikes KO over the edge, so you can OHKO things through Focus Sash. Also, it doesn't have a 4x weakness. So you can much more reasonably bulk out Rapid Strike Urshifu, because even if you take a super effective hit, if you bulked yourself out sufficiently, you're probably going to live. Whereas the Single Strike Urshifu, you're not really going to be able to bulk yourself out of a Fairy move Survival with your 4x weakness. Obviously, you can Terra out of it, and you can go into like Terra, Fire, Steel, or Poison, so you can resist it. But the Rapid Strike Urshifu doesn't need to do that. It gets to much more reliably just go for its offensive Terra. Terra Dark is still very good on Single Strike. Terra Water is still very good on Rapid Strike. The Rapid Strike just tends to be slightly better. I think because of the 4x, or not having a 4x weakness, and Water is a very good offensive coverage. I get, like, Dark is as well. But, like, both of them are brilliant. It just tends to be a leaning slightly towards the Rapid Strike Urshifu. So, those are all of my rankings for all the Pokemon that are brand new in the format. Feel free to disagree with them, because this is an entirely subjective list. But I have a lot of faith in some Pokemon that most people would have ranked lower. So, like I mentioned at the start, if you are interested in knowing how you should run any of these Pokemon, I have done guides for every single one of these Pokemon on my channel. So, like and subscribe and do all the YouTubey things. I'm sure that's a helpful thing to say. But yeah, go and check out the guides if you are curious on how to use any of these Pokemon.